Oh. So thank you for listening to Radio Waterloo. This is CKMS 102.7 FM here in southwestern Ontario. I'm Jennifer. I go by Yenny when I do radio because I'm from Sweden and people can't really say the rolling R here. So I started using Yenny. And today with me is Theo Fleury, hockey legend here in Canada. And he was in NHL. And even where I'm from, people know him because I come from a hockey town as well. So thank you so much, Theo. I literally reached out to you on Instagram and made this interview possible that we can arrange that. So thanks for coming out.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So obviously your career stretches back some decades, like in the 80s, you got drafted, but would you want to talk a bit about how you worked really hard actually to get drafted, and you were all over the place, even in Finland playing for the SM League there, and you were in Belfast, the UK, their version of the leagues. So you've been all over the place, and then you were drafted by the Calgary Flames.
Well, it all started, I'm obviously not the biggest guy in the world. So, I had to overcome, the stigma of, size, right? And, I subscribe to the Malcolm Gladwell theory of 10,000 hours. And so, when I started playing hockey as a kid, I didn't know it at the time, but, from the age of 5 when I started until I was 15 years old and left home, I put in these 10,000 hours of practice. And so when I left home to pursue a career in hockey, I was already considered an expert because I put in those 10,000 hours of practice. And so, that's how I was able to overcome, this whole size thing, was because I was ultra talented, ultra skilled, fast, all these things, aggressive, I didn't take any crap from anybody. And still, I had an amazing junior career. And basically the first year of the draft, I wasn't drafted. And then the second year I went into the draft, I got picked in the 8th round, 166 overall. So basically 472 guys got drafted before I did. And 1987, I got drafted by the Flames and finally made it to the NHL in 1989. And in my first year in the NHL, we won a Stanley Cup. So, I was able to overcome that whole size thing and went on to have an amazing, incredible, professional hockey career.
What is one of your favorite moments from your hockey career when you think back? I know
there's too many. There's too many, but I always go back to, they said I wasn't going to play one game in the National Hockey League. Okay. And I played over 1,100 games. I played 15 years in the NHL. And I see every single day that I got an opportunity to do that, when you set a goal as a young person and then you work towards that goal, when the whole entire world says that you're too small, I think, I dreamt about playing in the NHL, and when I got to the NHL, it surpassed everything, that I could have possibly imagined. And then, having the opportunity to win many championships along the way, was kind of like a cherry on top of the sundae, and to single out one specific time or moment, it's really, it would be really hard, but the simple fact that, when they pay you money, they pay you money to win. They don't pay you money to lose, right? And so, like I said, I was a part of a lot of winning situations, a lot of winning opportunities. And so, to me, that's what it's all about, I don't know if you can see behind me here, but I have a trophy case full of championship rings, right?
Nice.
That's that's why we play the game, right?
It's
That's why we do what we do.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? Like hockey goes way back and like it's sort of in people's heart. Like Canada, obviously, hockey is in people's hearts here and internationally as well. And even when I was reading about you now preparing, and I see that you go to schools, and one of the things that you say to the kids is that don't let anybody tell you what you cannot do.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, there's certain things you need to be successful, right? And I would say the number one thing is hard work, right? The harder you work, the luckier you get, they say, right? And I know that we sort of live in this woke culture, and I believe that that'll never change. The harder you work, the more opportunities you'll get, and with the more opportunities, the more successful you'll be. And I don't think that'll ever change, and I grew up in a small town in Canada where I watched people get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and work till 10 o'clock at night, and they were all successful people, right? And so I sort of took on that well, what's the word I'm looking for? Mantra, so to speak, and I worked hard at becoming, a successful hockey player. And then when I left the game, I just applied that to what I'm doing now. And I would say my off ice career has been more successful than my on ice career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually I met you in Kitchener, downtown Kitchener. You were here years ago for the Conversations with a Rattlesnake book that you and Kim Barthel wrote.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that like?
Well, it was an amazing experience. About 18 years ago, I went on a journey of healing and, overcoming some traumatic events that happened to me when I was a child and then as an adolescent. And I'd overcome addiction, but still had some mental health challenges and different things that were going on in my life. And I just finished a very successful first book, and where I exposed all these secrets that I was sort of carrying around. And then ran into Kim. And Kim is an occupational therapist who has a degree in neuroscience. And we sat down together and wrote a book about overcoming, traumatic events and challenges that we face in our lives. And they say that it's the greatest book ever written about the theory of attachment. And it's being used in 17 universities now in the psych field, teaching young psychologists how to talk to their patients. And so, it's been a very successful book. And, I do a lot of talks. I do a lot of workshops now around the subjects of trauma, mental health, and addiction, and how they're all connected, and just help people understand, what Because let's face it, the real pandemic on the planet is not COVID-19. The real pandemic is mental illness. And a lot of people don't know how to come, their mental health challenges. And so, I spend the majority of my time now either speaking, doing workshops, or doing interviews like this, telling people that they can overcome, whatever challenges they face.
Thank you. Well, so the adversity that you've gone through in your life, how were you able to get through those situations? Because now when you look back, you kind of have the solutions in your mind, but at the time you had to pull yourself up when you must have felt. So how did you do that?
Well, I think at the beginning of my life, I used alcohol and drugs as a coping mechanism to suppress the emotional pain and scars that were left behind from, the trauma that I experienced. And then, I decided that, those coping mechanisms weren't working anymore. And I needed to find different ways to, to deal with, that emotional pain. And so basically for the last 18 years, I've been out there collecting tools and different kinds of therapeutic modalities and methods and, all this stuff. And I have a very full toolbox of really great things that help me on a day-to-day basis manage, my mental illness.
It's incredible because when I was reading about you too, you were drafted when you were 19 years old. So that is so young. So now you've literally spent almost as many years giving back to the community and helping others through really passion for hockey and the things that you must have loved so much to do that you literally put in those 10,000s of hours to it.
Well, now I've put 10,000 hours in the therapeutic space as well. I just, I've always been a person who, likes to help people. And, I know I was an inspiration when I played in the NHL. I was an inspiration for, all these little guys who were playing minor hockey who had dreams and aspirations of making it to the NHL. And now it's, it's switched, into, like I believe in my heart that at the core of every single issue we have in society starts with trauma.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then you pick your poison as to how you're going to deal, with these emotional scars that are left behind from those experiences. And, a lot of us gravitate towards some sort of addictive behavior to use as a coping mechanism. But, I got to the point where I knew I was going to die if I was going to keep going down that road. And I didn't want to die. And so I really just dove headfirst into healing and spirituality and, all these amazing things that are out there. And, I still do it, to this day. I still, there's so many new things that are coming out, in the space of, like now we're talking about frequency and vibration and, grounding and, all of these holistic practices that have been hidden from us for centuries, right? Because pretty much big pharma owns every disease on the planet now. They own it. But their goal is not to cure people. Their goal is to have a customer from the time they're born until the time they stick us into the ground. And I didn't subscribe to that model. I knew that there was other things out there that were way better, that, were solutions. not band-aids, and it's probably the reason why I've had so much success in this space, is because I talk about real solutions. I give people actual tools that can help them heal.
Mm-hmm. And I really respect that you're so outspoken. And one of the reasons that I contacted you is because today in Canada, media is censored on Facebook and on Instagram, and you really can't, it's more difficult. And I'm a volunteer for this radio station.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody like yourself that speaks out about what is happening in the world helps us all, because like we have still freedom of expression and
Mm-hmm.
of speech.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. Well, what happened to me was at the beginning of COVID, I fell into a deep, dark depression. And, I've spent $1 million on therapy. I've done 10,000 hours of therapy. And here I was at the beginning of COVID having suicidal ideations. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So I book an appointment with my therapist. I tell her what's going on. And she goes, oh, interesting. She goes, what is the government using right now? And I said, well, manipulation, coercion, lying, stealing, cheating. She goes, who does that remind you of? I go, oh, reminds me of my pedophile abuser. What did he use? Manipulation, coercion, lying, stealing, cheating. So basically, the same mentality that a pedophile abuser has is the same mentality that our people that are in government have, right? And so what did we see happen at the beginning of COVID? We saw a spike in mental illness. We saw a spike in opioid use. 8-year-old kids were having suicidal ideation. And then ultimately, people were taking their own lives. And so we talk about systemic racism, systemic this, systemic that, but nobody talks about systemic government abuse.
right.
And so the government was abusing its own citizens, which was causing trauma, which was leaving the people in emotional pain and suffering. And what is emotional pain and suffering? Mental illness, right? So that's when I woke up, and that's when I started speaking, because I was like, I made a promise to myself many, many years ago. If I saw abuse, I was going to call it out. And that's all I've been doing. That's all I've been doing is calling out systemic government abuse of its own people. And that's exactly what's happening.
Have you gotten any backlash?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I am the most hated person for people who sit on the left-hand side of this argument.
Yeah. And yet what is being proclaimed from the other side, some of it is violence against children and really methods that are not safe for kids that are growing, coercion, persuasion, manipulation.
Yeah.
It's terrible to read about it. And
it's terrible to be living in it. We're living.
You're in Alberta. So people are leaving our province. I'm in Ontario. People leave Ontario and they go to Alberta, and then they say, I talked with somebody a few days ago. They said things are more normal here in Alberta.
Yep. Well, what I say to people from Ontario, you're more than welcome to come here. When you get here, don't vote for those crazy people on the left. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the same situation you just left, So,
I'm not sure how some of the government people can be involved in, for example, the W Economic Forum, because it seems like a conflict of interest that, you're a politician, but you're with some other entity. To me, that doesn't make any sense. And hopefully we can.
It's called treason. It's called, right? Yeah, it's an interesting time to be alive. But, the Bible predicted this, right? This is the last fight of good versus evil. This is it. And if we lose this battle, it's going to get really, like, people have no idea. They think it's hard right now. We're only at the beginning of this. We're only at the beginning, right? And they're just rolling out the same script that they rolled out 80 years ago in Nazi Germany. It's the same script. Censorship, you know, they're taking away our rights, you know, slowly, you know. So, yeah, that's why I'm fighting back. And ultimately, how many times has communism been tried? 24, 25 times in the history of the world. And the only thing it spits out is mass death. That's it. That's the only thing that comes out of communism. And with the vaccines, we're already seeing it happen.
Yeah, it's really terrible not to be able to have an open conversation with all of the media entities and all of the different people that live in the society. Instead, we have these like factions where on this side they think like this, and then on the other side. But then I'm also wondering now, like sometimes I think I communicate with bots on the internet, and it's not actually a person there. It's actually a guy that's spitting back kind of opposition.
Well, whoever controls the media controls the message, right?
Yeah. So which social media platforms do you like visit? Because I know that like Rumble is a place. I follow Russell Brand there. I know I saw Tucker Carlson with Russell. So you Tucker when he was in Alberta.
Yeah, Tucker and I are good friends. So
yeah.
And I was texting with him last night. He was in Russia.
Right, because his interview with Putin.
Yeah.
So like somebody like him is over there trying to speak with the so-called enemy. Like, who is the enemy anymore? Like, nobody's innocent anymore. We just need
Well,
some serious peace.
We all know who the adversaries are.
Yeah.
Right? They've showed themselves. But you know what's interesting is, you know, when Tucker got fired from Fox News, you know, he went to the X platform, the old Twitter platform. And I just saw a really cool stat. He's done 73 shows on X. And he's had over 2.5 billion impressions in those 73 episodes. So basically, you know, and we saw what happened with Bell yesterday, where they laid off 4,800 people. So basically, those of us who have social media accounts, we are now the independent media, and we are winning the information war. We're winning the information war because the Bells, the CTVs, the CBCs, the Globals, the CP24s of the world are going out of business because they're lying to the public. Right? And nobody's buying that anymore. That's why Carlson has had 2.5 billion impressions in a short amount of time. It's because people are done. People are done. They're fed up. Right? You know? We're tired of reporters asking these crazy people who are running this country softball questions.
Yeah.
And then when we ask them to debate with us, they don't show up. Why? Because they know they can't win the argument.
Yeah. So it's like, will the real Canadians please stand up? I guess they are.
Yeah. Well, slowly but surely.
Yeah.
You know, but people like free stuff, right? They love free stuff, right?
I think there's something about that, like when you kind of take away rights little by little by little, because since we've been in this pandemic, or now it's not a pandemic anymore, but like it's not over, right? But some people think it's over and it's like happy times and everything is perfect now. But I remember too in the pandemic, because I'm from Sweden, and talking with people there, and they said in Sweden they weren't able to lock people down completely because you have a law that you have the right to mobility. You can't like limit people's right to that. And then looking at Australia and going like, holy cow, like police came to the door of people that were trying to say something about the pandemic at that time there. And then us in Canada, we're sort of in between where, you know, like at this point, Joe Rogan says he's not coming to Canada. Like, what is, like, this is the country that we live in, and some people are saying it's okay.
No, I know. It's nuts. Like it's completely insane where we're at, right? You know, and you know, the simple fact that our leader of our country doesn't want to make Canada great again, what does that tell you?
Yeah.
You know, it's like the insane are running the asylum right now. That's what's going on, right? And we have the most corrupt, compromised, blackmailed government in the world, right? Klaus Schwab said in the video, we infiltrate cabinets all over the world. And he specifically singled out Justin Trudeau and his cabinet as those people that he's infiltrated.
Yeah. That's
So,
trouble.
Yeah. That's why we're in the situation that we're in.
So what is your relationship with First Nations people? You're Métis, your grandmother is Cree, and I see that you're in touch with First Nations people. You are.
Yeah.
So what's that like?
Well, it's been an amazing experience. You know, because of, you know, what the government did in the 60s, you know, with the residential schools, you know, now we have generations and generations of First Nations people who are traumatized, right? And because I had similar experiences in my life, you know, I'm able to go to these communities and, you know, give them a roadmap of how to heal from what happened, right? So, yeah, it's been an amazing experience. So there's 630 communities, First Nations communities in Canada, and I've been to over 450 of the 630 communities. So I've been all over Canada, you know, helping these people, you know, deal with their issues. So it's been amazing.
Thank you. And then one last question. Who, in your opinion, is the best hockey player all time?
Wayne Gretzky. Yeah. I think it's, you know, I think if Mario didn't have all those injuries and had that bout of cancer, he would have probably gotten close. But to me, Wayne Gretzky's the greatest. You know, that's why they call him the great one, right? You know, there's a reason why they call him the great one. So, you know, I had an opportunity to play against him, I had an opportunity to play with him. And yeah, I have nothing but great things to say. You know, not only was he a great hockey player, but he's probably a better human being. And I think that's what makes people great is, you know, who they are off the ice, right? So, yeah. So yeah, he by far, I believe is the greatest of all time.
Thank you so much for your time today, Theo.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome.